everyone, welcome to the Movie Section Show. My name is Fariba, and today I want to do a very different kind of video. Now, of course, typically speaking, the videos I usually post on my channel are mostly reactions to like trailers or episodes, or in most cases reviews, although I will say I've been slacking on the reviews, but I promise you I will try to get back on those on track in some form, some way. But considering the fact that The Marvels is releasing in theaters tomorrow, I'm actually going to be seeing it, I believe the 7/20 show on Thursday. I thought, why not just take a bit of time to kind of break down the Marvels, the situation that's been going on, just the things that we know so far, the expectations for it, breaking down a lot of like what's happening financially and box office wise, so on and so forth. So that's why I wanted to create this video, just to kind of break down a lot of things. This is kind of a part of what I want to discuss about regarding this whole situation regarding the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or in general sense, Marvel Studios and how they're putting out their work and just the quality of it. And I feel like, talking about the Marvels is a big part of that, especially as we're all probably going to be keeping an eye on the performance for the movie, both commercially and critically. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video, just to kind of talk a little bit more about the Marvels. I do intend to do a breakdown a little bit of some of the more recent news and more general news that we've been getting regarding a lot of the bombshells that's been happening behind the scenes at Marvel Studios. I do want to do that as a whole separate video, but I want to specifically focus on the Marvels. Things like, kind of doing a quick recap, talking about the box office expectations, projections, the theories that have been going around. And of course, we actually got the first reactions coming out from, I believe, the early screening that we just had earlier. So I just want to talk a bit of that. Let's start off by talking and recapping the movies and the things that we need to know before going into the Marvels. Now, of course, there's a lot of things that we kind of have to have a little bit of that background knowledge of. Like, we're talking Captain Marvel, we're talking Miss Marvel, WandaVision, and bits of Secret Invasion. So, of course, going to the sequel, like a lot of us knew that, this was technically supposed to be the sequel to Captain Marvel. I mean, Captain Marvel was a huge success despite a little bit of that, mixed bags with reviews. I mean, let's not lie. There's a lot of people out there who have some really harsh comments to say about Brie Larson and Captain Marvel. Although, let's just say, like, regardless of that, I mean, the movie made a lot of money. It's like one of the few movies that has made over $1 billion. I mean, that's insane, right? So of course, like, having a sequel to the movie, it's just a no-brainer right there. So for all of us, we would imagine that this movie was going to be basically a Captain Marvel 2. Now, of course, the whole pace of that, the whole storytelling of that shift gears, where as we started to, introduce more characters to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So Monica Rambeau / Photon, Miss Marvel or Kamala Khan. And as a result of that, the movie actually turned from becoming just about Captain America 2 to become the Marvels, right? Just to encompass all three characters who are very essential to the storytelling. So just to recap a little bit, we know that at least in terms of the Marvels, right? It's going to be happening right after the post-credit scene from Miss Marvel, right? So this is where we had Carol Danvers and Kamala Khan, somehow switch places, right? As a result of, Kamala's being malfunctioning, and somehow this led to this, unusual event that happened, and that's where everything paused. Of course, we see in the trailers where, Kamala ended up being, she's somehow in outer space, while Carol Danvers ends up, in Kamala's room, right? On Earth. So that's basically where we're starting off from, like right off the bat, from that timeline from Miss Marvel's post-credit scene. Of course, that's not the only bit that we need to know. Like, I mean, there's a lot of background details that we need to know about leading up to this movie, of course. So of course, like, I mean, for one thing, this is basically post-Endgame, right? I mean, this was what they were trying to desperately, trying to imply a little bit from that final trailer we got a couple days ago where, oh, by the way, remember that time we had Endgame and Carol Danvers was very involved in helping out defeat Thanos. And now here it is. We're now in post Endgame, and this is based in the multiverse saga. And now we're dealing with the consequences of what happened after Endgame. And Carol happens to be a big part of that. Now, as to what happened to her post Endgame, we're not really sure. We just know that, she's been traveling across the galaxy, probably helping out, some groups of people, probably very involved with the whole Skull situation, which I'll talk about a little bit, but that was something that was very, crucial to her storyline back in the first Captain Marvel movie. So a lot of that is probably what we believe could be, implying what may have happened in between Endgame up to, the Marvel's timeline. But we don't really know much about what happened to Carol in between, aside from the fact that, those could be the possible cases. So that's at least with Carol. Now, we do have a bit more of a better idea about Monica Rambeau's story and Kamala Khan's story, because we've actually seen them, being told within the actual timeline. So, of course, Monica Rambeau, this is not the first time we really met her. We see a grown-up version of her in WandaVision, but we actually first met her back in Captain Marvel when she was a much younger, version of Monica, someone who's just, who did look up to Carol Danvers because of the fact that Carol happened to be really good friends with her mother. So we did see that established relationship, although it would be implied as of this point that, things may have been a bit more strange. That's something that's been implied, but we can't really confirm, but yeah. And so that's at least at least in terms of the dynamic between Carol and Monica, right? We know that they had a really friendly relationship back in 1995 and Captain Marvel. As of this point, it's very unclear where the relationship is, although again, it can be very, either a strained, tumultuous, or one that, they haven't really been keeping in contact with each other. But we do know that, in terms of WandaVision, right? Monica Rambeau was one of the victims who did perish, who basically was vanquished or basically was snapped as a result of, the events from Infinity War. She was one of those individuals. So as a result of that, she did not get to see or did not get to take care of her mother during the times that I believe when she had cancer. We saw that in WandaVision. We saw the event where everyone was blimped back, the events of the blimp where everyone just comes back. We see that moment happening in WandaVision. I believe it was like the second or third episode. So we knew all those events, playing out in WandaVision. As a result of that, she eventually joins Sword, alongside, Agent Wu and Darcy. And because of the results of, her encounter with Wanda and what was happening in Westview, that eventually she had to be involved. And of course, as a result of these chain reactions, and her trying to get back into Westview and the whole situation with the Hex and how Wanda was controlling a whole town using her powers, that, when she was trying to enter back into Westview through the Hex, that, some sort of cosmic energy must have been manifested with her, must have ignited something within her, that now she has the ability to emit these cosmic powers, and hence why she's basically Photon by the time we get here. Or at least, I don't know if they officially confirmed her as Photon or have called her as Photon officially, but we know she's Photon, right? And so, of course, from WandaVision, we know that she's been trying to, talk to Wanda, trying to get her to understand what's going on, trying to influence her to kind of, fix the situation that's been happening in Westview. And of course, that eventually does transpire. And her and Wanda depart, they go their separate ways. And then we do end up seeing by the end of, I believe it was the post-credit scene, that I think like one of the Skrull agents who were, posing as one of the SWORD agents, had reached out to Monica, saying, hey, what's up? We need your help. Probably, directly, through Nick Fury, that probably eventually got her ended up, reuniting with Nick Fury by the time we get to the events here, because we do see the trailers that she and Nick Fury are working together at Saber, doing something in the galactic universe. So that's where we are in terms of that story with Monica, right? Like, I mean, eventually, as a result of that post-credit scene, she eventually does meet up with Nick Fury, leading up to the events that we have here. Then we meet up with Miss Marvel, or Kamala Khan. We saw her side of the story, her origin story last summer, in her own mini series on Disney Plus. We get to meet this character who, is really obsessed about the Avengers, loves talking about them, and really idolizes Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, especially, considering the fact that, we had, the events of Endgame, and that probably, got her really, excited to kind of just, be involved in this whole culture of this whole geek culture, right, and superheroes and all that sort of stuff. And of course, like, as a result of her encounter with getting, having possession of the bangle that was passed down from not just her grandma to her mother but to her, right, and eventually once she has used that bangle, she started to realize that she is able to manifest these cosmic energy like powers. So, and of course, from that series, they really dove a lot into her origin story, the connection between the past and the present, how it's really interconnected, her encounters with the Jinn, how she's basically, a descendant of a Jinn, So that was kind of the breakdown of what happened in Miss Marvel. She eventually, was able to overcome, the rogue Jinn that she had to deal with, again, using her powers and, finally kind of getting some resolution as to what happened to her great grandmother, because that was a big part of what was really making up her story. Again, that, I think when it came to Miss Marvel, it was really deep into understanding her culture, finding some resolution, and resolving a lot of this relationship between her mother, and her grandmother. So that was what happened right there. Of course, by the end of the series, we had a lot of big bombshells and reveals that happened. Like, for one thing, of course, we had that post-credit scene where, she ended up in her room, and somehow we had that switch as a result of her, her bangle just glitching all of a sudden and transporting her and Carol from like different locations. But before that, of course, they had implied about a big, revelation that not only, I believe it was her friend, I can't remember her friend as of the moment, but her friend had tested out her DNA or something, or took a look at it and realized there was something very unusual about it. And then, we hear something about mutants, and we hear the X-Men theme song just sprinkling around the background, and which basically confirmed that she was, I guess you can say, the first mutant in the universe, at least in this sacred timeline, right? So that's at least what we know about Kamala Khan right there, and her story, and how that fits into the Marvels. And of course, lastly, we have to also address Nick Fury, because he's also in this movie. I mean, when we look at the trailers and, his last whereabouts, right? It's definitely like day and night. Like, and at least in the Marvels, like, I mean, aside from the last trailer that we got a few days ago, most of what we've been getting the vibes of is really fun, very upbeat, very energetic type of vibe throughout that trailer. So that's something I would imagine will be the same case when we see the movie tomorrow. But when it came to Nick Fury, right? It's not so long ago that we saw Nick Fury, of course. I mean, he literally had his own show, Secret Invasion. This was the first time we actually were able to get some sort of update, like just knowing what really happened to him. Like, we knew the fact that he was in outer space, his version, we knew back in Far From Home, right? They had revealed that the Nick Fury in Far From Home wasn't really him, but it was a Skrull version who was just, mimicking him, just to take care of his business, right? And the actual Nick Fury was out in space doing whatever, right? I mean, he's doing something. And of course, this was basically clarified in the Secret Invasion show, that he was trying to help the Skrulls relocate to a new location that will be suitable for them to inhabit, right? And eventually we see in, Secret Invasion that things kind of fail. Those plans did not work out. And we get to the events where, of course, we meet up with these rogue scrolls who, are trying to, go a different approach to, resolve the whole situation, how they're basically refugees on Earth. Even considering the fact that they're going to go into extreme measures of, like, exterminating the human beings on Earth, so that way they themselves get inhabit Earth for themselves. And we had that whole storyline right there. Eventually, what was it? Galvik or something like that. Eventually they were able to, overpower the villain in, Secret Invasion. I can't remember his name right now from the top of my head because it's so late at night. But yeah, they were able to overcome him thanks to Gaia, who helped, take down Galvik. I'm pretty sure his name was Galvik. And eventually that ends up becoming the conclusion right there. I mean, we do see him leave Earth as once, everything had, kind of unfolded in Secret Invasion. Not as to say that, it ended up in a happy ending. It didn't really end up in a happy ending, because there is kind of that whole situation going on with the Skrulls, how now they're basically now the targets because of the events that happened at the end of Secret Invasion, and how a lot of them were shape-shifting, and it was just like a really scary thing that people are now very alarmed on Earth. So that's the whole situation right there with the Secret Invasion as well. I mean, again, he left Earth, and it looks like he's going to be returning to Earth, because we do see him in the trailers returning to Earth to find Captain Marvel, aka, of course, Carol, and that's where we get back to, right? So that's a whole recap of everyone's stories that, we've seen so far, how they're all involved in this, how they all, come together to set up this movie that we have here. So, of course, let's just talk a little bit about what to anticipate, the fact that, we got that final trailer a couple days ago, and I already did my reaction for it, so if you're not seeing it, I'll put my link down below, so check it out there. Just to quickly talk about what has been, established so far, what people have been, kind of been discussing on the internet verse, right? Or the internet sphere, is kind of the developments that we saw in that final trailer. Now, of course, a lot of people are like, well, of course, one of the reasons why they put out that final trailer is because it's like a final push to get people to go and check out this movie. Like, I mean, just from the beginning of the trailer, you can tell that, the fact that they started off with like Iron Man and Captain America, and then the events from Endgame, you just knew that, it's just kind of like, they're trying to like get everyone to remember the good old, well, not the good old times, because the Endgame was not a very, happy moment, totally, but going back to kind of the best moments of the MCU content that we got, that was really kind of this peak era for Marvel Cinematic Universe. Let's remember those times, and remember how this event will still somehow have some effect on the multiverse saga in some capacity, which, I mean, we got that feeling of as we get to see more and more of the footage and that final trailer. We start to see again how the villain Dar-Ben, played by Zah Ashton, how she's very involved in this whole situation regarding, time, not really time travel, but the multiverse. We do see a bit of the Inscursion kind of coming together, breaking apart. We're seeing, you can literally hear Monica talking about how there's these realities are just kind of coming together, again, implying the Inscursion right there. So lots of things that we got there, like that implies kind of how important this movie is going to be in establishing not just kind of what's been going on with everyone within the movie and how they're connected and how they're going to be working together, but how this will be very essential to understanding the developments going into Secret Wars, like the Avengers Secret Wars movie that we're going to get, at some capacity. I mean, that's if it holds. What is it? I think right now it's 2027. That's if that date even holds. So we'll see if that date holds. But yeah. So we know that they were implying a little bit of that. We get a little of that gist where they're trying to imply the multiverse and how Dar-Ben is involved in this. She has the bangle. So as I said before, that looks similar to the bangle that Kamala Khan has. which, you know, if you remember from the Miss Marvel show, that there was actually 2 sets. Kamala had 1 set, the second set they couldn't find, which could be implying that that could be the second set, or who knows. Like, I mean, there's some predictions going on that Darben could actually be coming from a different universe, who had also experienced a similar endgame event, that, you know, that could be implying kind of this parallelism or the similarity between universes, and that maybe she actually traveled from a different universe to here, or something like that. And that's what we're dealing with here. If that's the case, that would be a pretty cool story. We'll talk about more of the reactions later on, but yeah, that's kind of the theories that I've been hearing so far, that Darben could actually be coming from a different universe that, you know, had some sort of similar end game, you know, event. Darben's involved in it. She could actually be kind of like the Thanos equivalent of her version or something like that. Like, that's some of the theories I've been hearing, which could explain a little bit about what's going on here, why she has her tussle with Captain Marvel, because she is specifically targeting Carol Danvers in this story. We actually see this very prominently in the trailer, how she is really fighting off Carol a lot. I think it's like in between like some of the middle bits of the trailer. So she definitely has her own, you know, issues with Carol. It's just a matter of what is leading up to this, right? We don't know what set off this, you know, this point between Darben and Carol Danvers, and why we have this whole, you know, conflict that's been established here. So that's like the one question we have. Again, the theory I've been hearing is that she could be from a different universe, and therefore maybe the universe that she met Carol Danvers is who she's, you know, trying to fight off, and she's now fighting off a different Carol Danvers, the one that we see here in a sacred timeline, that, you know, that she's now facing off. So again, that's just theories, but that's something that we've seen so far in the trailers, where she is fighting off Carol. She has this bangle. There's some sort of excursion that's been going on. Maybe that's something that's probably going to be kind of the focus of, you know, what's going to happen. Maybe diving a little bit more into those excursion situation, which, if so, this will be very essential going into Secret Wars. Of course, like, there's some other things that do happen. Like, now there are some bits and pieces that the trailer itself had implied a little bit. Now, we did get one confirmation about a cameo, right? We anticipate that there's going to be some cameos in this movie, whether it be very, you know, crucial to the storytelling, or if it's going to be just a gimmick. I can't say for sure as of this point, because again, I've not seen the movie. I'm not going to see the movie until Thursday. But we did get one confirmation of a cameo, and that is Valkyrie. We saw her in the latest trailer, where she's, I believe, speaking with Carol, maybe like a morale boost or something like that, or she must be very involved with something. I've been hearing something about the Bifrost, so maybe that's implying a little bit of the fact that there's going to be more cameos beyond Valkyrie. But yeah, Valkyrie has been the confirmed cameo, or at least one of the confirmed cameos thus far. There's been also hints, you know, here and there about other cameos that might, you know, occur here. Again, if the theory stands that, you know, Darben comes from a different universe, and we're dealing with a whole situation regarding the excursion and, you know, possibly, you know, multiverse travel, you know, that could be, again, implying why we might be having a lot of these cameos happening. I know there was something about, you know, at the end of the trailer, I believe it was Nick who said it, that, you know, they are already here. That comment right there, a lot of people have their light bulb, you know, light up, saying like, oh, wait a second, are they implying the mutants? Are they implying the X-Men? Yeah, a lot of theories just really just started to kind of, you know, just spark out of, you know, thin air. I mean, not thin air, but it's been implied for a while that, you know, X-Men is going to be coming. I mean, I don't think a lot of people thought that this was going to happen that soon. But considering the fact that, you know, The Marvels is going to be the last movie coming out in 2023, not the last project, because we learned a little bit about What If might be actually coming out at the end of the year, so that actually might be the last MCU project. Again, that's reserved for a different discussion, but The Marvels is the confirmed last movie coming out this year in 2023, and supposedly the next film that we're going to get is going to be Deadpool 3, although again, lots of questions about the whole strike situation. Again, I'll talk more about that whole drama in a whole different video, but But we know for a fact that the Marvel is going to be the last movie here. And after that's supposed to be Deadpool 3. So maybe this is kind of a good transition between, the Marvels and Deadpool 3 to start introducing some of the X-Men stuff. It would make a lot more sense. It'll make things a lot more of an easy transition coming from this movie to Deadpool 3, of course. And yeah, I mean, again, there's one scene that I was actually, I had talked about a little bit in my reaction, of course, that, there was a figure that was wearing like a white suit or something. Some people were talking about the fact that that could be binary, or at least Carol in her binary form. But after having taken a second look at it, I don't think that's Carol. It looks like it could, I mean, of course, it's not Monica, because Monica is right there talking to this individual. But it is clear that it's not Carol. It's not Monica, but it's someone else. Some people are thinking that it could be X-Men character. I think I have my own implications who it could possibly be if it's an X-Men character. Some people are saying that it could be Maria Rambeau, so Monica's mother, maybe from a different universe, which if so, that basically ties into a lot of the theories that have already been, transpiring a little bit regarding the whole excursion situation, the multiverse, again, how this movie could be directly tied to Secret Wars. And so if that's the case, it makes a lot of sense how this specific, this really quick but very ambiguous scene that we got from this trailer could have some connection to what's going on in the multiverse. I mean, it's been a while since we've really been discussing about the multiverse in depth, and this is like, okay, this could be, this could be a big one to really kind of just focus on a lot of what's going on, the effects of it, and the consequences of it. But yeah, I think that, the trailer really kind of gave a little bit of a glimpse of what to expect. Again, really kind of giving us this idea that it's going to be a really huge movie that's going to be connected to Secret Wars, that's very consequential from what happened from the events of Endgame, and how, again, this is a movie that needs to be watched as a result of all these connections, which in one case makes me super excited because, I mean, I feel like for a while, like a lot of what's been going on in the multiverse saga, or at least the content we've been getting since the multiverse saga has started, has been very disjointed. Like I've said before in a lot of the movies that I have reviewed for, from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that a lot of stories have really not been diving too deep into the multiverse stuff, even though that's supposed to be the big thing, that's, the big event that we are preparing for as we get closer and closer to Avengers Secret Wars. And yet we haven't really been diving too deep into it. We got some, bits and pieces of this information, whether it be Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, or Loki. And of course, right now, Loki season 2 is going on, and we're kind of learning a little bit about this whole temporal loom and the temporal aura that's supposed to fix it and all that sort of stuff. So we are starting to get a little bits and pieces of it, which is great, because I feel like that's something that a lot of us have been begging, we've been begging to kind of become a bit more focused as we get more into these movies, especially if we're going to try and prepare and set up the Secret War storyline. And it seems as if that's going to be the case here, then, it could be very promising storytelling. So yeah, that basically breaks down everything I need to talk about, the recap of it, as well as what we know so far leading up to the movie's release. So having now done the recap and just talking about what we know so far leading up to the movie, let's talk about kind of the drama that's been fueling up with regards to the Marvels, because there's been a lot of details that came out in just about the last week, particularly regarding about that Variety article. So just to kind of get some of the, the basics out of the way. So we know for a fact the Marvels was supposed to have came out sometime last year, I believe it was last year, July, I believe was like the original date. Then it got pushed to November, then it got pushed to February, then to July this year, and then eventually now November 2023, which is now definitely the set date. Now, of course, the reason why this movie got moved so many times was because of the COVID pandemic. So production, everything had to be moved. Then we had apparently some schedule issues going on, or some production issues behind the scenes, apparently, that also pushed some things out. And then, of course, like the whole situation regarding, the quality of the MCU, and how people have been really dissatisfied with the content of it all, that once Bob Iger came back into the picture, that he decided to kind of slow things down with the amount of, projects that have been coming out of Marvel and giving it a bit more of this, time to kind of allow the movies to kind of get this relief and the projects to really develop, right? Which also led to Quantumania and the Marvels having to kind of shift their orders. So, having now mentioned the basics, right? We got that Variety article last week that really kind of just blew into a lot of this drama that's been happening behind the scenes at Marvel Studios. There's a lot of things about it. I mean, they really talk about like so many different aspects, and I think it's just a lot of things regarding about this year and last year. And I'm gonna talk about a lot of the details of it in a different video when I, try to talk about more of the drama and, the bombshells that happened. But there is one specific thing in the article where they dropped the bomb on the director of the Marvels, Nia DaCosta, and how they're trying to basically drag her on the bus, basically, for what I guess they're trying to do is defend what led to the failures of the Marvels, even though the Marvels hasn't even been out yet and we don't know how it's going to perform, although we kind of know a little bit about its projections a little bit, which we'll get into in a bit. But she got dragged on the bus in this article where apparently, the article tries to pin those schedule problems and its delay on the director, and how at one point the director had to was working on a different movie, and even though the Marvels wasn't really completed or something like that, and how they basically pinned her as kind of one of the faults to basically kind of the whole failure for the movie or the problems that have been happening behind the scenes. Even at one point apparently they had done a test screening for the movie in Texas, and how it got some really not so great reviews, some really mixed reviews. So they try to detail some of that. Even at one point they're saying how she had was in London shooting her next movie, even though the Marvels hadn't completed its edits and all that sort of stuff. So those are some of the details that were laid out in that Variety article already, kind of like in a sense of really trying to defend the situation that's going on, trying to like control some things that have been happening with the Marvels, even though like this is not a really good light on the movie, because this article came out like a day or two before, like a week and like a day before the movie's release. And it's like, why would you release this? Like, are you trying to tarnish this movie early on or something like that? I have no idea. I don't know what was the intention behind this, but it was an unexpected bombshell that just, had everyone questioning, like, what the heck is going on? Now, of course, since then, the director herself, Nia DaCosta, has responded to that, I believe, in her conversation with Jake Talks. In that interview, she was specifically, asked about this, the specific story that Variety had reported about the whole, so-called post-production, problems, and how she's being pinned as, kind of the fault in all this. And she really responded saying that, this whole, situation that they tried to focus on was taken out of proportion, how, this is actually a very common thing. And it's not as to say that, the movie had changed gear to the whole storytelling, but the fact that the movie itself was basically set in stone long before, and nothing had really changed beyond that, even after post-production. So it was just a matter of editing, and that, the procedure that she had gone through is very common for any director. So she was basically, again, taking out of proportion. So she definitely went right on trying to defend herself and, trying to control that narrative that was set from that Variety article, which again, not sure why I guess the way to do it is that maybe it was just to try and pin director to be the direct cause of the movie's failure early on, like doing so in a very premature way. I possibly, could this be premeditated? Who knows? But it was a very odd story that just came out, and like one of the most oddest timing possible. Of course, like, that is not to say that this article trying to address this so-called, problem behind the scene, didn't just happen just randomly, of course. One of the reasons why it probably, was kind of, had like this whole graph itself right there is because of the projections that did come out for the movie in the last month or so, and how it hasn't been the most promising. So just to kind of talk about that, I do actually have a graph. I actually created a graph just to kind of talk a little bit about box office, and just trying to address the whole situation regarding the Marvel's box office, because right now the box office projections do not look so great for the movie. I think right now it is projected to make between 50 to 70 million dollars domestically, which is not the greatest if you compare it into like a Marvel standard, which I'll showcase in a second. But yeah, it's not the most promising box office projections. And yeah, let me just go right down into the Excel that I created. So here's an Excel that I actually created to really kind of give a breakdown of how to determine box office, the success, the failure of it all, how people are able to really determine all of that based upon the numbers, right? So that's what I did right here, just to give this idea of why this is very problematic for the Marvels given the latest projections. And again, kind of this overall, concern that the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Marvel Studios is facing right now. So the way I did this is that I decided to go and put in the numbers starting from Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness. Anything before it, I decided not to add in, because I feel like the whole pandemic, era was it's really hard to kind of, test those out and trying to determine numbers from that, because it was definitely a very unusual period there. I think after Doctor Strange, things start to really get back to normal a little bit in terms of like the movie experience. So that's where I started off with Doctor Strange. I put the budget, the opening box office, domestic number, the worldwide gross, break-even point, and net profit, which are all in the millions. So just because they're like 294.50 doesn't actually mean that. That's like in hundreds, that's in millions. But yeah, so this is how people really break down the box office. Now, the success of a movie in terms of box office relies on how much of that money they're able to get back, as well as how much they can get the profit out of it, right? So the way that they get that base is from looking at its budget. So of course, in the example of Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, the budget would be I think it was $294 million. And so that was the primary budget for the movie. And that's, that's without taking, for this actual number, I'm not sure for whether or not this also takes into marketing and promotion, all that add into the added cost for the movie as well. So those are usually not added in, but that's something that they have to take in consideration in terms of, trying to determine break-even point. So speaking of the break-even point, how do we determine the break-even point? Usually the best way to calculate the break-even point is that the break-even point would be double the budget, which means that there is really no loss, there's really no gain. It's just met that middle ground, like it got back what it really needed, because again, it's taking into account things like, marketing and, promotion. So there's all of that added cost that's not added in the budget part, but, it will eventually be, factored in once we get to that break-even point. So the break-even point is basically double of the budget. And if a movie is able to make more than its break-even point, then that's when they actually start to make profit. So that's where we see the profit end right there, where it's like how much money they have made once they went past the break-even point. And that's, again, where they, determine the profit of it. And that's usually if they make enough money that, is very satisfactory, then a movie will be considered success. So let's start off with, again, Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, the example of how the budget is $294 million. The break-even point would have been $589 million. The worldwide gross ended up being $955 million, and which in that case made a profit of $366 million. Now, the reason why I wanted to add all these numbers in is just to see kind of the trend of how the movies have been performing since Doctor Strange. So all the Marvel movies have released since then. So, of course, Doctor Strange is the closest movie that we had since I wouldn't say post Endgame, but since No Way Home, that we had a movie be that close to getting the $1 billion mark. I mean, the movie did perform very, very well. Although, again, a lot of people are a bit more mixed about the whole, quality of it. Even I have my own, my own middling regards to how the movie was made. But regardless, the movie did make a lot of money. And of course, out of the bunch of that I've put in here, it made the most in terms of domestic box office. So it made $187.4 million. So that's a really good number. Usually if a domestic box office number is able to make just about 2/3 of the budget, that's a really good sign of a movie, performing very well and, potentially becoming a box office success. And so that's the case that we see here domestically. And again, this is just domestic numbers. So it was $187 million just domestically. If you were to take into account the international numbers, it probably did very well. Globally. So if you were to take both of those numbers together, it probably may have made just about the equivalent of its budget. I did not add in the international numbers, so I don't actually have that in here, but that's usually the case. I think what I've seen so far in terms of how the scale has been, or the how it's been separated in terms of how it's performed internationally versus domestically, is that it's usually almost 50-50. It could range from like 55 to 45 or 52 to 48. That's usually been the case that I've seen so far with Marvel movies. So it's basically been kind of in the 50-50 range. I think from what I saw with Wakanda Forever, I think it performed way more domestically than internationally. So that will be like one of the few cases where it performs better domestically than internationally. But Doctor Strange, I do recall, was performing very well internationally as well. I think it was about 54% of its final worldwide gross comparison to domestic, where it was like 45-ish or 48 or something like that. So roughly that's all I have. It kind of looks like for all of these, like it's like 45-55 in terms of international and domestic. So with the case of the fact that it did make about $187 million, basically, that the domestic box office was pretty good for Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness. International, taking into account the international numbers, it probably boosted that global total to almost near its budget. So as a result of that, Multiverse of Madness performed very well. I had no issues, box office wise and becoming a success. So that's like a really, I guess you can consider that as like kind of the standard for Marvel, right? Like, I mean, usually Marvel movies should be kind of hitting the $1 billion mark, or at least near the $1 billion mark, right? So that was the case for Multiverse of Madness. Of course, after Multiverse of Madness was Thor: Love and Thunder. The budget was a little less than Multiverse of Madness, of course, and it did make $144 million domestically, and then the worldwide gross $60 million. The break even would have been $500 million, and it had a net profit of $260. So we do start to see kind of a dip a little bit in terms of how much of a profit that, Thor: Love and Thunder made. Of course, Thor: Love and Thunder wasn't the greatest reviewed movie out of the bunch that we had last year. A lot of people were not happy with the storytelling of it, which makes sense. It kind of translates a little bit into the box office right here. That is not to say the movie wasn't, a success. It was still a success. It still made the money. Although there is a bit of this disappointment that a movie like Thor, right? Thor 4, a character who has been very well established in the MCU since phase 1, right? Who has been a really major figure, who is one of the original 6 Avengers characters. For some reason, their 4th movie, even though it's coming post Ragnarok, didn't perform in a way that, could have hit the $1 billion mark. It's a bit more baffling, right? So this is where we start to see a bit of this trend of where movies aren't really performing well as a result of a lot of the inconsistency that we've been getting from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Again, that whole discussion for a different time, but we all know that the Marvel Cinematic Universe hasn't been the greatest since post-Endgame. We've had a couple of hits here and there. There's definitely ones that have stood out, like Shang-Chi and WandaVision, No Way Home, of course. But generally speaking, though, a lot of people aren't really satisfied with the Marvel Cinematic Universe since Endgame, and we're starting to see the effect of that box office wise, and that's starting to have a big hit on the Marvels, which I'll get back into. And just to kind of quickly get through the rest of this, right? Wakanda Forever did pretty well, of course. It did $359 million. It didn't hit the $1 billion mark that the first Black Panther movie did, but it did enough, especially again considering the fact that it was coming off post-pandemic. It did perform really well. Now, let's jump right into Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, because this is where things start to take a very interesting turn. not for the greatest, because this is where we start to really kind of see the alarm buzzing for Marvel Studios, because this is where I believe a lot of people have mentioned that Quantumania was a huge box office disappointment, especially in Marvel Studios standard. So, and here's why, right? This is a breakdown of it. So, the budget for Quantumania was $200 million. At least that's what is listed, right? So that's actually less than most of the movies that we have here listed, right? So it shouldn't be too hard for a movie like Quantumania to make up its profit, right? Now, domestically, it did perform very, very well. It made about $106 million. I think it did better than Ant-Man and the Wasp and I believe the first Ant-Man movie. So a huge improvement there. But in the long term, the movie did not perform in a way that Marvel would have expected, because its total grossing ended up being $476 million at the box office. And so and now a lot of people are going to be saying, well, $476 million seems like a lot of money, but that is not enough for a movie like Quantumania to become a success, because the break-even point for Quantumania would have been at least $400 million. And that's without taking into account things like marketing, promotions, the ads, all that sort of stuff. So it probably would have been more than that in terms of break even. I mean, this is just me kind of giving an estimation based upon just a standard, calculation of what a break even point could be. But it could be far more than that. So based on just the break even point here, I mean, it may have gone no more than a net profit of $76 million. That is not great. That is a really bad performance in Marvel's eyes, right? I mean, this is something that you never ever really see for a Marvel movie, just to make that much money at the box office. So this is where we start to kind of, start to ring the alarm right there, because of the fact that if Quantumania performed this poorly at the box office, given the budget, given how much it made, worldwide, that this may have been kind of like, the wake up call from Marvel that, they have to start changing things up. Again, I'll talk more about that in a different video, but yeah, this is where it starts to kind of set the chain reaction for what has been a really bad set of movies not performing well. Of course, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 came out in May, so that was the next movie that came out for this year, and that performed much better. Of course, that one was definitely a hit. It made about $145 million. Break even would have been 500, but it made just about 300 million, right? So that's a good number right there. That movie was indeed a success. So how does this affect the Marvels? So the Marvels has a budget of $274 million, right? That's the approximate so far. And so the break-even point would be roughly around $549 million. So that's a lot of money. I mean, this is like going into like Doctor Strange level right there, right? I mean, the break-even point is even more costly than Thor: Love and Thunder, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and Quantumania. So the fact that we're getting the early projections saying that the movie could make about in between 50 to 70 million, right? That is not a good sign for the Marvels. Like, as I said before, most of these movies have made at least about $100 million domestically at the box office. The Marvels barely even getting to 70 million. That's even if it's lucky to get to that $70 million point. I mean, this is a point where we're almost already considering it almost as a failure prematurely, just because of the fact that it's not even making up most of its money back, not even just here, but internationally, right? So as I said before, most of the numbers I've seen so far in terms of the scale between the international and domestic numbers have been around 50-50. So even if we were to take into consideration international numbers, the global scale of the movie, I think, globally speaking, the projections are showing that it can make no more than $140 million globally during its first week. I mean, that's barely even making half of that budget right there. So it's not looking like a really good sign for the Marvels right now in terms of, its box office. I mean, as of this point, it doesn't seem as though it's going to even make any sort of profit. And this is where, again, I actually added a bit with DCEU, where I've added Black Adam and Shazam 2 as like a comparison, because a lot of a lot of outlets have been reporting how the Marvels would actually lose more money than Black Adam and Shazam 2, which of course have got a lot of headlines for losing a lot of money, as even though they've had a lot of hype going into this movie. So an example of Black Adam, right? Budget was $250 million. Then we had a worldwide gross of $393 million. Even though its break-even point was supposed to be $520, it had at least a loss of $126 million at the box office. There was no net profit. It lost money. It's a flop. It's a failure. This was established last year, of course. And of course, there was a lot of drama that unfolded concerning about Dwayne Johnson, how, Shazam didn't, how he stopped Shazam from showing up in the movie, or it was something, or the other way around, sorry, how Shazam, how Dwayne Johnson prevented, Black Adam or Superman from showing up in Shazam 2 or something like that. And lots of drama that happened right there too. And we see that unfold here, how, Black Adam was a flop. It did not even make back the money that it needed to make. And in the case of Shazam 2, right? So the budget was much smaller for Shazam 2. It had $124 million. It had a worldwide gross of $133 million by the time it ended its theoretical run. The break-even point would have been $248, which means that the movie had lost about approximately $114 million. That's at least. Again, not taking it, maybe the whole, break-even point may not even take into consideration like marketing and promotion. So yeah, DCU had a huge loss right there. They lost hundreds of, thousands of dollars in profit right here with Black Adam and Shazam 2. And that should kind of give you an idea of how, this could be breaking out for the Marvels. And now the Marvels actually has a much bigger budget compared to Black Adam, right? So we're expecting that this is going to perform in a very horrible, course in the way that Black Adam did, maybe even worse than that, because again, it had a much bigger budget. The domestic, box office projections could be as low or high depending on where it ends up being, right? So it made $67 million domestically for Black Adam, and right now the Marvel's projected to make either between 50 to 70 million. So it's not looking great so far for the Marvels box office wise. I mean, right now, I can't even imagine what's going on at Marvel Studios just to see a projection like that. 50, 70 million, right? Like, that's preposterous. I mean, that is just, I don't think Marvel Studios has ever hit something as low as that before. I mean, even movies like Eternals have performed better than this, right? So yeah, this is very alarming. This is why we got that final trailer for us, to kind of try and boost that domestic number up to maybe perhaps, the 80, 90 million range. And that's just being very, very generous. And of course, again, whatever happens with the Marvel is going to be kind of like this 50-50 with international. Of course, again, that's even if the international numbers even perform just as equally as what we're seeing domestically, right? So it's not looking so great for the Marvels box office wise. It's just not great right now, right? I mean, this is kind of going back into kind of this whole Marvels and Shambles situation that's been going on, and how, there's this whole overhaul, and how Marvel Studios has to really rethink a lot of what they're doing with their projects and the future of them. So we'll see how all that goes, but just seeing the Marvels, right? Like, we're about to end off the year 2023, and we have our final Marvel Studios movie, and it's not performing great. It's not ending off in a very good note. I mean, it's performing even worse than Quantumania, which is like insane, right? Just to perform even worse than Quantumania. And this is going to be the fate for the Marvels. So it's not looking so great for the Marvels box office wise. I mean, at this point, like, it could really be determined as a flop very early on. Again, a lot of what's going to happen, I mean, again, the 57 million range is just a projection. We won't know the official numbers until we get that final, tabulation on Sunday, when they start to really compile that 3-day weekend for the domestic box office opening number, but it's not looking so great. It's very, very, serious, very, alarming again. Like, I mean, it's very alarming. And the best way to say it is it's very alarming. Again, and lots of, you know, buzzing, ringing, all that sort of stuff. Like, I mean, people are like, I cannot even imagine Marvel Studios right now having seen these numbers. So yeah, that's what's going on the box office right there. I hope that this kind of gave a better idea of how this all functions and why, right now things are a bit scary at Marvel Studios, knowing that they have this box office projection for the Marvels, which is supposed to kind of end off the year for 2023. So it's not looking so great for the Marvels, even though, again, I'm going to go see it regardless. Like, I mean, I watch any Marvel movies regardless, right? But again, things are not looking so great for the Marvels. Again, a lot of this going back to kind of the whole situation regarding the Marvel Studios and how the quality of the movies have really dipped in the last 2-3 years, how there's been a lot of drama going on behind the scenes and all that sort of stuff, right? And let's not even forget how last year we had so much Marvel content that a lot of people are just a bit tired right now. And to end this video off, let's kind of look into the first reactions that we're getting out of the people who've just seen the first screening for the movie. I believe it's at the premiere, of course. And so far, things have been pretty mixed, which is something I expected was going to be the case. And a lot of these reviews kind of break down a little bit of that. So let's just read a couple of them as of here, right? So let me just enlarge some of them. So first one we have is from Christian Harloff, who I will say, for one thing, like, I think out of all the movie pundits and all the critics out there, I feel like the one who I feel I'm most on par with or kind of have a similar taste to is Christian Harloff. So I feel like if there's anyone who's probably going to have the best idea of how I'm going to react to the movie, it's probably going to be Christian Harloff, at least in my case. So let's see what he has to say. So, just saw the Marvels. The chemistry is there with the leads. The storyline with Carol and Monica works. Kamala's charming. Unfortunately, that's all the movie has. Sloppy plot, uneven script, and 2 bits that single-handedly almost bring down the movie. This is a big miss. That is very disappointing to hear. And that makes me very concerned when I go check out this movie tomorrow, because I would imagine that the chemistry between the 3 leads are going to be the best part of it. I think the fact that he, highlighted, Iman, I think it was Iman Vellani as Kamala, calling her charming, which I feel like is expected, because when you look at the trailers, or at least the first 2 trailers, because she was barely in the last trailer, but at least in the first 2 trailers, you can see how much energy she has, how she's very, energetic, upbeat, how she has a lot of enthusiasm. And again, you can really get the sense of the energy of her character and how she seems to kind of be the best bit of the movie. I feel like I feel like even in the reactions I did for the trailers, like, I had a feeling that Kamala was going to be one of the best characters in this movie. So I'm not surprised that he highlighted Kamala as being charming. The fact that the chemistry does work, so at least that's promising. The fact that he does point out the plot and the script and apparently some events that happen in the movie, that it really kind of becomes very unpleasant, that is very worrisome, which I feel like it's kind of been, you kind of get the feeling of that in the trailer, that things might not have the best story plot. So again, that's just one review, of course. And again, even though I said that, he's someone who I feel like I feel like I'm most on par with in terms of like the taste of movies and everything like that, it is very underwhelming just to read this and knowing that that's just kind of how he feels. So I feel like that's something to be concerned about, just for me, of course. But let's read more reviews, right? So here's one from Eric Davis. Nia DaCosta's The Marvels is a great time at the movies. It's well paced and full of frantic, hilarious energy. I even liked it more than 2019's Captain Marvel. This thing moves. The location swap action is a blast, and the end credit scene is, shocking emoji. I'm definitely a fan. Okay, and he has actually a much longer post. Iman Vellani really does steal the movie too. She does a really good job adding that wide-eye, holy cow humor to the story. It reminded me at times of Spider-Man's trip to space in Infinity War. Okay, I could get that gist. Solid surprises, strong cast chemistry, unique action sequences, lots of flirkittens, and light breezy runtime, an MCU win in my book. Okay, so that one's definitely far more on the positive side. Don't see really too many negatives, so that's kind of good. Again, it's giving off the idea that this is a really fun movie, so that's at least a good sign. Again, I get a lot of that vibe in the trailer as well. Definitely a contrast from Harloff's review right there. So again, I mean, we'll read more and see how other has to say, but again, we can see a contrast of people's or at least critics reviews and their feelings about the movie. So just to read a couple more. So pop culture. The Marvels is pure fun. It's an intergalactic character journey focused on further developing Carol Danvers, Monica Rambeau, Kamala Khan individually and as a team. It's also a clear new beginning for the MCU. Major implications for the future. Fans are gonna be talking. I'm assuming, okay, another lots of positive regarding the energy of the characters and performances, which I feel like seems to be the general trend here. So that's at least a good sign in that case. Major implications for the future. I wonder again if this is going to be implying back to Secret Wars and this connection. Again, we get a lot of this from the trailers. Fans are going to be talking again. I'm assuming this post-credit scene because I know I've been hearing a little bit about post-credit scene right there. So yeah, that's a really interesting assessment right there. Okay, so from Leo Rydell, let's talk about the Marvels. I had a lot of fun. Iman Vellani's star as Kamal and her family is so lovable. Carol and Monica are both excellent as well. The three lead actresses have excellent chemistry. Okay, I gotta read this. VFX cooked. The space scenes in VFX blew his mind. I have some issues. Okay. Dar-Benn was a bad villain. Her motive, character, and acting were dry. She lacks the presence of a good villain and isn't quite unique or rememberable. Okay, there's also a certain planet they travel to where the gag overstays its welcome a bit and the pacing can get wonky at times. But all in all, I really enjoy the Marvels and I'm going to see it again. Okay. And let me praise Nia DaCosta for the incredible directing camera work, a queen who left a significant creative stamp on the MCU. Okay, so this one's definitely going into the mixed bag. So, again, I feel like this one definitely trends in what Harloff was saying, how the performances and dynamic between the characters are great, but the negatives are the villains and some of this clunky storytelling, which again seems to be kind of a common trend here, which again concerns me a little bit going into the movie when I see it tomorrow. But the fact that he's leaning more towards like at least enjoying it is at least a good sign. So maybe that's something. But again, I feel like I had a feeling that the villain's gonna be a bit underwhelming because again, let's be honest, when it comes to Marvel villains, they're not the greatest. They've always been. I mean, again, let's talk about the Marvel problem, of course, with villains. So I see as though it's continuing that trend of Marvel villain problems. So not really surprised there. Honestly, like again, I'm not really surprised there. I feel like they also a lot of that is reflected from the trailer as well. Like I feel like I still don't know much about the villain, even though we've gotten a bit more snippets of the character, like the sequences here and there, especially in the last trailer where we got to see a bit more of her. But it makes sense why she's not a really, great villain, probably not as well established, and so not really surprised about that comment. Leishman. So the Marvel is so much fun, action-packed goodness, but genuinely hilarious and exciting to watch from start to finish. I love my girls so much and seeing them fight all three together truly special. Higher, further, faster, baby. Okay, very positive right there. So, let's see. Zach Pope. The Marvels is a winner, not a perfect winner, but a light breeze entertaining blockbuster that delivers a satisfying team up. Brie Larson really shines as Captain Marvel. Finally, Iman continues to be a shining star as Kamala Khan, and Teyonah Parris knocks it out as Rambeau. Okay, again, similar comments that we've been hearing about the performance here. Seems as though like everyone does a really good job playing their character as well as the dynamic. So not really surprised there. Kristen Maldonado. So the Marvels is the most fun I've had watching a superhero movie in a while. It's hilarious, action-packed, and full of girl power. Kamala was a standout, and so many moments surprised me. There was a great balance of the team while dropping shocking bombs that will change everything. Okay, again, same thing. We've been hearing about the dynamic. again, she mentions a little bit about this bombshell, the shocking bomb. So there must be some really big development here that they're going to unfold in the Marvels, which again implying the importance of this movie probably leading up to Secret Wars. I'm gonna assume that's my guess. But yeah, overall positive, and again, kind of really hyping up some of the big developments going into the multiverse saga. So that's one bit right there. I gotta read the full thing. Okay, so Tom Chattelbash, it's saddening that it's tracking so low because the Marvels is a blast, a breath of fresh air for the MCU that balances terrific humor and heart throughout and boosts fantastic performances and chemistry from its main trio of Larson, Parrish, and Villani. Dakota was the jolt of energy this character and story needed, delivering and visually dynamic, creative action sequences and a short storytelling. The villain may be flat and lackluster, but there may be a smidge too much humor, not uncommon Marvel problems, but this is a sequel that soars past the original in virtually every facet. Left me with the huge smile on my face. Okay. So we see the good and the bad right there. So they talk about the chemistry. Again, that seems to be a really common theme right here, that the performances dynamic seems to be the highlight here, the positive side for the movie, but the more negative side is the underwhelming villain and sloppy storytelling. But some of them have felt are enjoying the movie overall. So interesting assessment right there, of course. So let me see if I can read a couple more. If it's Justice League level. Oh, I want to read this. Okay, so the Marvels is Justice League levels of that. I don't know what the hell I just sat through. So many random threads, empty payoffs, a lack of any real emotion or character, tonally and narratively, a Jackson Pollock painting. Oh god. A season finale to a non-existent season of television. A mess. Wow, that was a drop right there. Oh my god. So Griffin definitely did not love this movie whatsoever. As to Stephanie Ramirez, the Marvels from start to finish was a wild and fun ride. Nia DaCosta did an exceptional job in showing the strengths and weaknesses of each of the characters. Iman Vellani, Brie Larson, and Teyona Paris stole the show, and Zaw Austin as the villainous Darbin was badass. Okay, so this one's definitely more on the very positive side of the movie. So yeah, I feel like there's a common trend though that we're seeing, at least a common pattern throughout these reviews. So a lot of them have mentioned how the positives at least are the performances, the dynamic between the trio, really calling out Iman Vellani's energy as being one of the standouts, kind of, comparing it to, Tom Holland's performance, Peter Parker, which makes a lot more sense, like giving off that, very, youthful energy that, kind of lifts up the environment, the situation, everything like that. So, or lifts up the spirits. There you go. Lifts up the spirits. So, not really surprised about that. Again, I really get that implication. I really get that sense from the trailers as well. So, I'm not really surprised about Iman Vellani being one of the standouts in the movie. I would imagine that, here, I mean, that's how I felt in Miss Marvel. I really enjoyed her in Miss Marvel. If you, followed me when I was doing the reactions for those, I enjoyed her there. I'm happy to see that she's doing great here as well. So, looking forward to that. Of course, a couple of negatives have been, pinpointing about the poor villain. Not really surprised about that because, again, this is kind of a common problem with Marvel and how they've really have some lackluster, really underdeveloped, villains. So, not really surprised about that. Again, this is considering the fact that Darbin is so new as well. Like, we don't really know too much about her. And, like, even from the trailers, we don't really get much in terms of her backstory. That it's just, I mean, you can get the sense that it's going to be very underwhelming. So, not really surprised about that. The one that really kind of stood out, of course, is the storytelling and plot. A lot of them have, really kind of singled out how the story itself is not really well paced. It seems as though it's kind of really off focus here and there, or that it's just really kind of, how do I describe it? Very clunky, very sloppy from what Christian Harloff said. So that is a bit of concern, of course, which again, I'm not really surprised because I feel like that's something that I get the feeling of from the trailer as well. I mean, the fact that some of them have, at least kind of, singled out the humor being the good part, so maybe that's gonna come, in line a little bit of the movie, but the fact that the story itself is one of the big problems for the movie is very concerning, of course. So, um, yeah, like that's something that I'm gonna have to kind of prepare myself for if that is the case. Again, I feel like, as I said before, I feel like my taste is gonna be more in line with Christian Harloff. So it's like, it's not, just to read his review is definitely very disappointing. So, but I'll be watching it tomorrow, of course. I mean, if there's one thing, of course, that some of them have mentioned is that it's gonna reveal some really big bombshells and have people talking about it. So that could be regarding about its connection to Secret Wars, so maybe that could be it. But yeah, I think that basically wraps up what I have to talk about. You know, the Marvels. We talked about the box office. We talked about the recap for the movie, the theories, as well as the first reactions that we've gotten for the movie. Again, we're anticipating some very underwhelming performance for the movie, and you know, kind of this huge scare that Marvel Studios has to deal with, knowing the fact that this is going to be the performance that we're going to be anticipating. And even though we already know commercially that it's not going to be performing very well, it seems as though critically it's not going to be as great. So again, lots of, you know, underwhelming developments for the film. I mean, the last thing I really want this film to do is really fail, but you know, I mean, things gonna, you know, this is gonna be the effect of it all. So we'll see how things work out as Marvel Studios starts to go through their whole overhaul. Again, I'll discuss more about the whole drama that's been going on and the developments since then. Again, there's been a lot of things that we've got updates about, such as, you know, Blade, you know, being rated R, getting that R rating, or developments of, I think, again, the whole Echo situation, how it's gonna be Marvel Spotlight. But yeah, I think that basically addresses the Marvels. I have now broken down both the commercial and critical, you know, response for what could be happening for the film, what to really anticipate for it. I will be watching the movie, of course, tomorrow with a couple of my friends. And I know I've been slacking on reviews, but I will definitely have a review out for the Marvels and give my take on how I feel about it. So I hope that this video has helped you out, have given you guys kind of a bit more perspective what to anticipate for the movie as we get really close to the movie's release. We're not just about hours away. But yeah, let me know your thoughts, having now gotten a little bit more of this perspective. If you haven't already been knowing about this, what do you think about the performance so far for the film? Kind of what we've seen so far in terms of projections, the fact that, you know, it's not going to be performing so well. The projections are really low. The first reviews have been a bit more mixed as well. Like, what do you think about going into the Marvels? Are you going to be watching it the first day, the first weekend, or are you going to be holding off and waiting until it gets to streaming on Disney Plus? What are some things that you're looking forward to seeing when you get to watching the Marvels? What are your theories, predictions going into the movie, of course, now that we've gotten that final trailer as well? And let me know if you have any other thoughts going into the Marvels movie, whether it be the movie itself, the studios, kind of the whole, you know, mess that's going on with Marvel Cinematic Universe, just anything about it. Let me know in your comments down below, and make sure to like and subscribe.